Quick, try to guess the oldest joke ever written down. Something ancient, wise, profound, right? A clever riddle carved by philosophers? It's a fart joke. The oldest recorded joke in human history, scratched into clay in ancient Sumer around 1900 BC, is, and I'm cleaning this up slightly, a joke about a woman farting in her husband's lap. That's it. That's the beginning of recorded comedy. Nearly 4,000 years ago, before the Bible, before the Great Wall, someone decided the funniest thing worth immortalizing in one of humanity's first writing systems was a fart. Which tells you something huge. Not just that ancient people had a sense of humor, but that their sense of humor might be almost identical to yours. So did the people even further back, the ones with no writing at all, the ones in the caves, actually crack jokes and laugh? The answer reaches back further than our species itself. Here's what makes this one of the trickiest questions you can ask about the past. A laugh doesn't fossilize. A joke leaves no bones. You can dig up a spear, a skull, a painted wall, but you cannot excavate the moment a group of people around a fire fell apart laughing at something. Humor is made of breath and timing and shared context, and all three vanish the instant they happen. So, on the surface, this looks unanswerable. How could we ever possibly know whether a human 40,000 years ago had a sense of humor? And yet it might be one of the most answerable questions about the ancient mind. Because humor turns out to leave fingerprints in three completely different places, and all three point the same way. The first is biology. Laughter, it turns out, is not something humans invented. It's a piece of hardware far older than we are, and we can trace its evolution across the animal family tree. The second is the written record. The moment humans could write, they immediately started writing down jokes. And when you actually read those jokes, something uncanny happens. You recognize them. Their structure is your structure. The scaffolding of a 4,000-year-old joke is the same scaffolding holding up the ones you heard this week. The third is living human cultures. The groups who still live closest to the ancient way, small foraging bands, don't just tell jokes. They've built humor into the machinery of their society, using it to do a job you'd never expect. Put those three together and you don't just get a yes or no answer. You get something stranger and more moving. The realization that a sense of humor isn't a modern luxury, or a sign of sophistication, or something that arrived with comedy clubs and sitcoms. It may be one of the oldest things about us. Older than farming, older than language, possibly older than being human at all. To see why, we have to start not in a cave, but in a laboratory, with a rat being tickled. In the 1990s, a neuroscientist named Jaak Panksepp noticed that young rats, when they played, made a specific high-pitched chirping sound, a frequency far above what human ears can hear. Curious, he tried something that sounds absurd for a serious scientist. He started tickling the rats. And the rats went wild for it. They chirped in rapid bursts, they chased his hand, they came back for more. When he mapped it out, the pattern was unmistakable. The rats were, in every meaningful sense, laughing. They had a favorite spot, the nape of the neck. The young ones laughed more than the old. The chirping came during play and during tickling, exactly like a child's giggle. Now, a rat laughing might feel like a curiosity, but it cracks the whole question wide open because it means laughter is not a human trait sitting at the top of evolution. It's ancient wiring buried deep in the mammalian brain, shared by creatures that split from our lineage tens of millions of years ago. And when you look at our closest relatives, the picture gets even clearer. In 2009, a researcher named Marina Davila Ross ran a remarkable study. She tickled young great apes, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and human babies, and recorded the panting, breathy sounds they made. Then she analyzed the acoustics and mapped how they related to one another. What she found was that ape laughter and human laughter form a single family tree. Our laugh and a chimp's laugh are branches of the same sound, descended from a common ancestor. The math pointed to laughter being somewhere between 10 and 16 million years old. Sit with that number, 10 to 16 million years. Laughter is older than the human species by an enormous margin. It didn't begin with us. We inherited it from an ancestor we share with the other great apes. And it almost certainly began as the sound of rough and tumble play, the panting of two young animals wrestling, signaling to each other, "This is fun, this isn't a real fight, keep going." Laughter, at its root, is a signal of safety and play. So here's the first solid conclusion. Any human who ever lived, every ancestor in every cave going back and back, could laugh and did laugh, because the equipment was installed millions of years before they were born. That part isn't a guess. The reflex is ancient, universal, and shared with animals. But, and this is the crucial turn, laughing is not the same as humor. A tickled rat isn't getting a joke. A wrestling chimp isn't being witty. Laughter is the reflex, humor is the mind behind it. The ability to notice something absurd, to build an expectation and then snap it, to find a thing funny. That's cognitive, not just physical. So the real question narrows. Sure, ancient humans could laugh, but did they have the mind for comedy? Could they build a joke? For that, we turn to the second fingerprint, and the first thing humans did the moment they learned to write. The instant humans invented writing, they used it for the important things. Taxes, laws, records of grain. And then, almost immediately, they used it for jokes. That alone is telling. Writing was precious, difficult, and expensive. And people still spent it on being funny. We already met the oldest one, the Sumerian fart joke from around 1900 BC. But look at what that joke actually requires. It sets up an expectation. The idea of something that has never happened since the beginning of time, something grand and eternal, and then punctures it with something crude and human. That's not a random noise. That's incongruity. The collision of the lofty and the lowly, which is one of the fundamental engines of comedy still running today. Whoever wrote that joke understood setup and punchline. And here's the thing writing reveals. A joke this polished doesn't appear from nowhere. It's the tip of an oral tradition that must stretch back thousands of years before it. People were clearly telling jokes long before anyone could write them down. Travel forward a few centuries to ancient Egypt, around 1600 BC, and you find a joke with real comedic craft. It's structured as a piece of advice. How do you entertain a bored pharaoh? You sail a boat of young women dressed only in fishing nets down the Nile, and you tell the pharaoh to go fishing. It's cheeky, it's got a visual, it's got a wink. It's the kind of joke you could imagine landing at a party today. The Egyptians also loved satire and caricature. They drew comic sketches of animals doing human jobs. Cats serving mice, a lion and an antelope playing a board game. Little visual gags scratched onto scraps of limestone. Political cartoons, essentially, 3,500 years ago. But the real treasure, the thing that settles the argument, is a book called the Philoggelos, which means the laughter lover. It's the oldest surviving joke book on Earth, a collection of around 265 Greek jokes compiled roughly in the 4th or 5th century AD. And reading it is genuinely uncanny because you already know these jokes. Not the specific words, the shapes. There's a whole category making fun of the egghead, the absent-minded intellectual, the same stock character as the clueless professor in 100 modern comedies. There's one where a man goes to this scholar and says, "The slave you sold me died." And the scholar replies, "By the gods, when he was with me, he never did any such thing." That is a joke about a man too dim to understand death, and it is structurally identical to jokes told today. There's another. A man visits the doctor and says, "Doctor, whenever I wake up in the morning, I feel dizzy for 20 minutes and then I'm fine." The doctor says, "Then get up 20 minutes later." That's it. That's a 2,000-year-old joke, and it still works. In fact, a British comedian named Jim Bowen once performed a set made entirely of jokes from the Philoggelos in front of a modern audience, and they laughed. Jokes written down over 1,000 years ago, told to people with smartphones in their pockets, still got the laugh. If you want proof that the human sense of humor has barely changed, that's about as close as history gets to a controlled experiment. Then there's Rome, which might be the most relatable comedic culture of the ancient world. The Romans were absolutely soaked in humor. They had raucous stage comedies full of slapstick, mistaken identity, and scheming servants. The same plot machinery that still powers farces today. They had savage insult poetry. The poet Marshall wrote short, brutal epigrams that read like ancient roasts, mocking bad breath, bad poets, and social climbers with a cruelty you'd recognize from any comment section. Cicero, the great statesman, was so famous for his wit that his personal secretary reportedly compiled an entire book of his jokes and one-liners, a book tragically now lost to history. Imagine losing a 2,000-year-old celebrity joke collection, and the most human evidence of all is scratched onto the walls of Pompeii, frozen in time by ash. Among the thousands of pieces of Roman graffiti are jokes, puns, insults, and boasts. Ordinary people being funny for no reason other than to be funny. Crude drawings, wordplay, mockery of the neighbors. Not official literature, just regular Romans. Goofing off on a wall exactly like people do today. So the written record is overwhelming. For as far back as writing goes, humans have been sophisticated, structured, deliberate comedians. But writing only reaches back about 5,000 years. To bridge the gap to the truly ancient, the pre-writing, foraging humans who lived like our deep ancestors, we need the third fingerprint. And it flips our whole idea of what humor is even for. Anthropologists who've lived among the world's remaining hunter-gatherer societies noticed something they didn't expect. These groups are often hilarious. Constant teasing, joking, mockery, and playful insults run through daily life. But the most revealing example comes from a custom among the Jew/Hwansi people of the Kalahari, documented famously by the anthropologist Richard Lee. It's called insulting the meat. Here's how it works. When a hunter makes a big kill and brings it back to camp, you might expect celebration and praise. Instead, everyone mocks it. They tell him the animal is pathetic, scrawny, a bag of bones, barely worth carrying home. They tease him relentlessly. And the hunter is expected to agree, to laugh, to downplay his own success. Lee was baffled by this until it was explained to him. The joking is deliberate social engineering. If a successful hunter were allowed to feel proud and superior, he might start to see himself as better than everyone else, as a big man who could boss others around. So the group uses humor, teasing, mockery, laughter, as a tool to keep him humble and keep the band equal. As one man told Lee, they refuse to praise the kill precisely so that a good hunter won't grow arrogant and come to think of the rest of them as his servants. That is a jaw-dropping insight into ancient humor. Because it means that for people living the way humans lived for most of our existence, humor wasn't just entertainment. It was government. It was the tool an egalitarian society used to enforce equality, deflate egos, and hold the group together without any chief or police. And that's almost certainly one of the deepest, oldest jobs humor has ever done. Line up all three fingerprints, and the answer to our question comes into sharp and honestly beautiful focus. Notice what the two oldest, most universal types of humor actually are. First, the body. Farts, sex, the crude and the physical, the Sumerian joke and its endless descendants. Second, the fool, laughing at the idiot, the egghead, the man too dim to grasp death, the arrogant hunter brought down a peg. These two veins show up first everywhere, across cultures that never met. And that's not a coincidence because they map onto humor's two deepest purposes. The body jokes are about bonding. Laughing together at something crude and shared and human is a way of saying, we're the same, you and I. We're in on this together, drop your guard. It's the descendant of that play panting from millions of years ago. The signal that says this is safe, we're playing, we're a we. The fool jokes are about leveling. The insulting the meat function, using laughter to police arrogance, to test who can take a joke, to keep anyone from rising too high above the group. One kind of humor pulls people together, the other keeps the pecking order in check. Both are, at their core, technologies for holding a group of humans together, and that reframes everything. We tend to treat a sense of humor as a bonus feature, something fun but frivolous, the entertainment on top of the serious business of survival. The evidence says the opposite. For a small band of humans utterly dependent on cooperation to survive, the ability to laugh together, to diffuse a tense moment with a joke, to take a teasing without turning violent, to knock an ego down without a fight, that wasn't a luxury. That was survival equipment, as real as a spear or a fire, A group that could laugh together could stay together. Humor may literally be one of the reasons we made it, which leads to the most startling realization of all. If you could somehow sit down beside a human from deep in the ancient past, around a fire 40,000 years ago, you would almost certainly be able to make them laugh, and they could make you laugh. You wouldn't share a language, you wouldn't share a single reference, but you would share the machinery. The play laugh inherited from a common ancestor, the delight in the absurd, the instinct to tease, the joy of watching someone build up an expectation and then knock it flat. Your fart joke would land. Their fart joke would land. Across an unimaginable gulf of time, the one thing that would connect you instantly, without translation, is the thing we assumed was most modern of all. The joke is the oldest bridge we have. So go back to that Sumerian, 4,000 years ago, pressing a joke about a fart into wet clay, spending some of the most valuable, hard-won technology of the age to make sure that gag survived. It's tempting to see that as a punchline about how crude our ancestors were. It's the exact opposite. That little clay tablet is proof that the person who made it had a mind just like yours, a mind that noticed the absurd, that couldn't resist a good bit, that understood deep down that a shared laugh is one of the finest things a human being can offer another. They laughed with the same reflex a wrestling ape laughed with millions of years before them. They built jokes with the same setup and snap you use today. And they used those jokes to do the most important work there is: to bond, to belong, to keep each other honest and humble and close. We are not a species that developed a sense of humor. We are a species that has always had one, that laughed before we could speak, joked before we could write, and used comedy to survive long before we used it to entertain. The laugh is older than the language. The joke is older than the wheel. So the next time something catches you off guard and you feel that involuntary bark of laughter rise up out of nowhere, recognize what it is. That's not a modern sound. That's the oldest human music there is, echoing out of 10 million years of ancestors, all the way back to two young creatures wrestling in the dirt, panting with delight, telling each other, "This is safe. We're together. Isn't this fun?" And somewhere in ancient Sumer, someone is still very proud of that fart joke.